Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's office hour. I want to start by apologizing for yesterday, how we were. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This always happens. I'm so sorry. I always forget to mute. Okay. Um, yeah, I want to first of all apologize for yesterday, how we're cut short. Um, so today we're just going to continue from where we stopped. I rewatched the session and we stopped at we excuse me. We stopped where we were talking about maps, right? Just as an overview, yesterday we covered quite a number of things. We covered the main method, we covered the print statement, we covered variables, how to the different ways in which we can declare variables. There are also some examples how to declare variable using var, dynamic, final, const, and data types, right? We also went through the differences, cases in which you can use either of them, right? So we're going through how to declare variables using data types, and then we had covered string, integer, double, lists, and we were about to just finally go through how to use a map before the call ended yesterday. So that's where we're going to start from. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay, so yeah, I thought it best to leave to leave the part exactly how exactly in the state that it was yesterday, so that we don't confuse each other. So going by what we see here, yeah, this was the example of the lists where we got to see that you can reassign values to lists as opposed to when you declare a variable with, you can reassign values to variables declared with data types, not just lists, pretty much any data type, as opposed to when you declare the variable using a final or a const, right? So, okay, so here's the map. Yesterday I mentioned that a map is when we create a noun, when we create a variable using a map, it's followed by 2 curly brackets, and then your values go in here. The values of a map are usually in key value pairs, where you have the key followed by a colon, then the value, right? So it's essential that when you're creating a map, there has to be a key and there has to be a value. We're going to go through how we can access the values inside of a map in a bit, right? We also covered that without adding data types without explicitly stating what kind of what particular data type this map is going to be, it's always excuse me, going to be identified as dynamic, right? Here, it's because we've assigned this a string, our names list is always going to be a list of strings. If we were to, in any case, assign something other than a string to our list, it's going to yell because we cannot do that since we've explicitly stated that this list will contain strings, right? That's the whole essence of this assignment here. In between angle brackets, you get to state what data type you're expecting to see inside of the list. It could be a string, it could be an int, it could even be a map, right? It could be anything that you want inside of your list. But as soon as you explicitly state it, then you have to continue with that pattern whenever you're assigning values to the variable. Okay, let's correct that. So the same applies to lists, to maps rather. The same applies to maps. But the difference is you would have to state what data type the key is and what data type the value is. So first you state the data type of the key, which is the first, and then separated by a comma, you also state what the data type of the value is going to be. It could be an int. In that case, this is going to throw an error because we're currently using a string as the key. So if I were to change this to a number, the error goes away. We get to see, yeah, it corrects that because it's expecting the key to be an int and the value to be a string. If I were to change this to a double, this is going to throw an error because it's expecting a double as a value and not a string. So I hope that is slightly clear about the whole idea of maps. Now, going by the previous example that we had, to access the value of a map, we first of all call the name of the variable, and then using square brackets, we get to state what key we want its value to be displayed. So say, for example, we want to get the value of this name key. We get to state the key in between the square brackets, then run the code, and we should see Abbie in the console. Because that's the value that was assigned to the name key. And if we change this to animal, then we should see dog in the console. And in the case where a key doesn't exist, we should get that because it doesn't exist. I thought it was going to throw an error, but yeah, it doesn't exist. Hence, there is no value that's going to be displayed in the console. Then there's also something else to note. You cannot, there should be, that should yell at you whenever you have multiple, excuse me, whenever you have multiple keys with the same name inside of a map. It's not, ideally you should have that error. Oh yeah, there's a warning here. 2 keys in the map literal shouldn't be equal. So you should always have unique keys inside of your map whenever you create one, right? Because it's going to confuse. Remember, use in the case where you want to use the key to get the value, having multiple keys would confuse the compiler. I wouldn't know which value to return to you, right? So let's just take that out. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole idea about maps, key value pairs, access the key using square brackets. I think nouns also, maps also have inbuilt properties. You could just like lists with certain differences, right? You could check if it's empty. You could check the length as to how many items it has inside of the map. We should get to, because they're just two items inside, two key value pairs inside of the map. You could also access the keys inside the map, as well as the values. So there, it has its own inbuilt properties you can use, right? So yeah, on your own, you could easily explore all the different data types that are available to you in Dart. You could just test them around, play with them. The more you practice, the more you get used to these things. Sometimes I get confused because let's say so far, I mean, for a real long time, I use autocomplete. Right, I use autocomplete, and most of the things that I need to get done in a code, I have them in existing code bases. So I just mostly copy paste. I always know what the code is doing. So having to write code from scratch, having to create these variables and whatnot, I don't do them often. Hence why I need to pause and think hard so I don't make a mistake. But the more you practice, the more you get to understand all of the different data types, and the more you get used to them, right? So yeah, that's pretty much the conclusion on data types and variables and whatnot. So I'm looking at the comments now, and I see that someone says my screen is blank. Can someone else please confirm that you have seen my screen all along, please? Okay, great. All right, awesome. Awesome. Okay. Okay. All right, thank you. So yeah, that's okay. That's it for that. The next thing that would most likely just cover are, sorry, give me a bit. Are loops and control flow. Although there is a video, rather there are videos that clearly explain these things, the whole essence of trying to do this again is just so that, well, there's sometimes that watching someone do something live or directly helps in the learning process. So even though we've taken these, we've gone through these things, I would still advise that you go back to the LMS and go through the resources for week 2 again. Hopefully, for those who are still confused, hopefully this time when you go through the materials, you would be able to understand things a lot better. Also, the cheat sheet is a perfect guide for you that you could go through on your own to just understand some of the different concepts and different features of the Dart programming language. Okay. All right. So next we're just going to go through control flow and loops. We're not going to go into them in depthly. I'm just going to give some examples so that you get to see me do these things live, right? But we're not going to go in so deep because there are already materials that should help you to do that, right? Okay, just give me a couple of seconds. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, the whole idea of control flow is just as the words imply. It's pretty much to help us control how our code is run. So there are some times that you might need to run a certain code only if a condition is met, or you might you might want to do something first before you run a certain code, whichever the use case, right? There's sometimes while you're coding or while you're writing your code that you would need to set some conditions for your code, for your program, right? So if this condition is not met, don't do this. It's just like the task that was given to you for week 2. Oh yeah, the task has expired, so I guess now we could actually just use that as a proper example to explain control flow and loops, because these 2 things were pretty much all you needed to successfully carry out the task, right? That's literally all that was required. You needed some sort of control for your code, and you also needed to use the loop, as it was explicitly stated in the task description, right? So let me get that task and paste it here. That would be the perfect example for this. Oops, sorry. So this was the task, right? The task that gave a lot of people headache, right? So I'm just going to read this, right? It says, using Dartpad and a loop, not loops, a loop, you're required to increment a number and only display the following string when it gets to 30. First, it says to increment a number. And then it says, when this number gets to 30, that's the only time you're expected to display this string. Now, on the side, additionally, you're also expected to display only odd numbers ranging from 1 to 30. That's the task. That's the problem, right? Going by this problem, I can, like, if I had never seen this task before, I understand that, okay, I'm expected to use a loop. I'm expected to display a string. And I'm expected to display odd numbers from 1 to 30. 3 requirements, 3 problems. So first off, I want to, so going by the, sorry, let me just number these. Going by the requirements, like this is the first thing to do whenever you're presented with a problem. As much as you can, break the problem into bits, else you would just either overthink things and end up not doing what is expected of you, or you might just, you know, miss out on certain details. This is the breakdown. This is all that was expected of you for this task. Now, the first thing I would do is, okay, use a loop, right? And remember, one of the tasks says from 1 to 30. So I could just use a for loop. You could use any loop. Any loop works for this task. Any loop that, all the loops that exist in Dart can be used for this task. So using a for loop does not mean that this is the preferred kind of loop for this task. You can use any loop for this, okay? So first we would, we have a number, let's use count. We're assigning it a value. Then next, we want to give it a condition as to the condition for how long we want this loop to run for. And we want this loop to run as long as count is less than or equal to 30. And while this condition is running, what I want to do is increment count by 1. That's pretty much all this thing is saying. First, we need a variable. We need something that we need to check against our condition. And our condition is this loop is supposed to continue to run only when count is less than or equal to 30. And then while this condition remains true, we want to increment, increment count, want to increase it by 1. I explained in a previous session that this count, this plus plus is the same as saying count equal to count plus 1, right? This is the same thing. We're just increasing count by 1 using this short form, right? So this is a basic for loop, which this already meets the requirements for, this already meets the first requirement, which is to use a list. Now, the next thing we want to do is want to display a string. According to the instruction, it says to display this string only when our number is 30. How can we determine when our number is 30? That's where control flow comes in. We don't want to display this string when the number is not 30. We only want to print this string when count is 30. If I were to do this now without having some sort of control, if I were to print this, I'm just going to get the count is at from 1 to 30. It's just going to print numbers from 1 to 30. And this is not what is expected of us. This is not the task. We just want to display the string when our count is 30. So what we do here is to use an if statement. This is a form of control. We want to display the string only when count is equal to 30. If it's not equal to 30, we don't want to see the string. According to the instructions, we don't want to see the string. So this is how we get to achieve that using control flow and if statements. And when we run this code, we're expecting to see this displayed just once because count is going to be equal to 30 just once, right? Now, this has met the requirement this has met the second requirement. The next is we want to display odd numbers from 1 to 30. Now, what else we can do is, so we could use another if statement, or we could just attach an else if to this and set a condition that says, well, I prefer, it's best to use an if, because these are totally different things to check for. So we could use another if check to see if our number is an odd number. Apparently, there is a dart property that helps us to check if a number is even or if it's odd. This is a very simple way in which you could achieve this. Just use the is_odd property and then print count. This is expected to print count only when count is an odd number. So this is a very simple way in which the task could have been done. And then we're expecting that only odd numbers are being displayed in the console from 1 to 29. Then when the number is 30, it is still going to display our string. Another way is the use of a modulo. You could use a modulo. A modulo returns, let me give an example. Let me just give a random example of how a modulo works. So you have a number, say 20 modulo 10. When you divide through 20 by 10, of course, it can easily pass through. We're going to get to modulo returns a remainder, either the remainder of a division, right? When you divide through a number, it returns, the remainder of a division. So if we want to check, say if this is 21, and we divide through by 2. Of course, when you divide through by 2, the remainder of this is a 1, which is what you see in the console. Hence, if we want to check if this is an odd number, and we divide it by 2, we're expecting that the remainder is most likely going to be, is not going to be 0, right? So if the remainder is not 0, we expect that that number is an odd number. So let's use that as a second solution for this problem. So if we divide through by 2 and it's not equal to 0, that is, the result of this division is not equal to 0, then we should print count. And it's still going to give us the same result as printing the odd numbers from 1 to 29, because these are the only cases where when you divide by 2, the remainder is not going to be 0. There are also other ways that you can think of, but these are like the easiest ways in which you could have gone through with the task. If the task was to display even numbers, then want to display numbers that when you divide through by 2, the remainder is going to be 0. So this is expected to print numbers from 2 to 30. And if we want to display this string only when the number is, say, 5, and we run the code, then the string is only going to be displayed at the point where our number is 5. So this is a good example of how to use loops and how to use control flow. Control flow helps us to run our code in the way that suits our use cases. In this case, we want to display the string only when, the proper use case is that we want to display the string only when the number is 30. And we also want to print our number only when the remainder of this division is 0. So we have successfully controlled it, and anything else that's going on in the code, we're not going to see it. It's looping through. This loop is still running from 1 to 30, but the only thing that we get to see are numbers in this case that meet our conditions, the conditions that we have set in our code, which is first off for odd numbers, and then for when our count is equal to 30. So this is like a very plain solution to the problem. Note that the first thing we did was to break down the task. After breaking it down, then we handled the solution step by step. There is no rush. There's no need to rush through and then potentially make a mistake. You take your time, break things down, and then you go on with the task that is expected of you. Some people created a variable, and while this loop was running, they incremented the number by 1, and then went ahead to went ahead to use this string and then print the number. This would give you 30, right? This would eventually give you 30. Rather, they printed this outside the loop, because when the loop is done, this number is going to equal 30, and then they just printed number, which is, well, it would give you the result, but it is not exactly an effective solution. You could have just easily done whatever you wanted to do inside of the loop, and you still get the exact same result. Someone asked why I regularly format my datapad. I love my code to, as much as we could just leave the code hanging around at different parts of the screen. I just like my code to be aligned. It's a habit now, and I just do it often. What do you mean by the numbers and not by the side? I don't understand. So yeah, this is pretty much it. The task was a perfect example to explain loops, and I still don't understand what you mean by the numbers not being by the side. Maybe use rephrase, please, or something. Hi everyone, can you hear? Wow, I was muted. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've been speaking to myself for the past how many minutes? I just thought to check the comments now and I see that no one could hear me. Okay, someone mentioned to use oh, hi, Emmanuel. No, it didn't. I did the saying on the side does not mean that you should display your string on the actual side. I'm sorry if if you misunderstood. I'm sorry if you misunderstood. If you misunderstood that, no, it did not mean the literal side. It didn't mean the literal side. Like, it just on the side simply means additionally. I hope that makes sense. Sorry. So I'm going to the questions, the comment section to ensure that we're okay. So I guess okay. I guess it's clear. Everything that was said so far, plus the task solution. I'm guessing that is clear because I just had to check the comment section this time because I don't know, I thought maybe there will be questions based on what we just talked about. Okay, also sincere apologies if that's English, if that confused a lot of people, but I know I really explained a lot of times that part of the I explained a lot of times that part of the task in the Slack channel, that it meant additionally. You're supposed to do it additionally. That's you're supposed to do all three things that are listed: display the string, display odd numbers, and also use a loop. So yeah, so please keep practicing. You could come up with what's the word? You could come up with tasks on your own and just keep practicing how to use loops and the different loops that are available to you in that. Okay. Okay. All right, so I guess that's pretty much all that we have to cover in today's office hour. If you have additional questions, please leave them using the form. I just came to the comment section this time to be sure that we were all together. So if you have additional questions based off the office hour today or some other question that popped up in your head, then please make use of the form that's on the LMS and drop your questions there. Okay, thank you all so much for joining today's office hour. We have another tomorrow at 5, I think. Yeah, we have another tomorrow at 5. So if you have questions, I can see you guys posting some questions in the comment section. We don't do that anymore. If you have questions, use the form on the LMS, drop your questions there, and I would cover them in our next office hour, which is tomorrow. All right, thank you guys so much. See you